The Book of Judges. Wow.
The Book of Judges.
Book of Judges.
The Book of Judges. I've heard of it. I know it comes after Joshua.
But honestly, I do not know. I've never opened Judges.
I know nothing. I have never read the Book of Judges.
The Book of Judges is like a great example of what happens when you do not do what God says. And there is no leader in God's people, and everyone is just left to do whatever they want. I think the Book of Judges is a great example of why we don't want to do that here and now.
Yeah, what I know about the Book of Judges is that things fall apart.
Israel is gonna get disobedient, and that there's gonna be some going back and forth.
I'm super pumped up. I was bummed out when Pastor Bobby pulled the plug on us a couple weeks ago. I cried again when it was over. But knowing that we're going to dig into Judges, I'm super excited, and I can't wait to dive in.
I'm really excited to see it and see how God's going to use that to work within our family. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to reading through the Book of Judges and see where it takes us.
That's kind of what my understanding of Judges has been in the past.
Let me tell you what I know. It's called the Book of Judges, and that's it.
That's really it.
Mr. Taylor, how did you find this treasure? And that's when I called you in my moment of need. Professor Bailey, I've made a remarkable discovery, but I need a man of your intelligence to help me know what to do. Whoa! You don't need intelligence. You need a shovel. You know, Mr. Taylor, I love doing this for the kids. But do you think that the parents will understand the deeper meaning of digging for treasure in God's Word? Meh. And speaking of parents, I just want to warn you guys that as we read through the Book of Judges, there's some things that come up that are pretty intense. Like in today's chapter and video, we're going to be talking about extreme violence. So anytime there's a warning in the Book of Judges, I'll be here to let you know. Mr. Taylor, you want to know what's better than one shovel? 2 shovels. Shh. Welcome back to the Book of Judges. And we've come out here to Joshua Tree National Park, but it is closed. And we are locked out, and that's a lot, like what's happening to the people of Israel, where Joshua has died, and a new generation now has come of age, and they are having a hard time in the Promised Land. So we're out here climbing on some rocks, and we're gonna dig for treasure in today's chapter of Judges 3. And it makes it very clear what God is doing here in the book of Judges when it says in verse 1, "Now these are the nations that the Lord left to test Israel by them." That is, all in Israel who had not experienced all the wars in Canaan. So we already saw that the tribes of Israel did not drive out the other nations. And so God left those nations. And now it specifically says that God is testing the new generation of Israel by these nations. Will they compromise with these nations? Will they start worshiping Baal and Asheroth, these idols? And will they start committing the sexual immorality that the nations around them commit in that idolatry? Or will they obey the Lord and continue to believe in his promises and live out the law that God has given them in the covenant he has with Israel. So this is a test from God to see if his people will obey him or if they will go the way of other nations. And it's so cool that we're reading about this test that God is giving his people. At the end of Judges 2, it says God's testing them. Here at the beginning of 3, it says in verse 4, these nations were for the testing of Israel, to know whether Israel would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. And this is perfect timing for all of us at Compass HB, because we just had a sermon this last Sunday about being tested. And that when we go through trials in life, if necessary, all the various trials that we go through, they test our faith. Like gold in the refiner's fire, they prove if our faith is genuine or not. This is what Peter says. This is what James even says, that we should count it joy when we face trials, because our faith is being tested and it will be proven and matured and complete. And we saw that the reason Peter and James were talking about being tested by trials is that's a common theme throughout the prophets, the writings, that God, here's something I guarantee you God is going to do in your life. He's going to test you. And he's going to want to see whether you obey him or whether you go the way of everybody else. And we saw that where it's very clear, just like it says it here in Judges, that Yahweh is testing his people. He wants to see these other nations are the trial all around them. They're going to oppress them, persecute them, seduce them, tempt them to sin. What are God's people going to do? He is putting them to the test. And I guarantee you that one thing that's going to happen in your life is God's going to test you to see whether you will obey him and his word or not. Judges chapter 3 is going to be easy for you to remember because in it we meet the first 3 judges. And the first judge is Othniel. And the way his story begins is actually tragic because it says in Judges 3:7, the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They failed the test of obedience. They did not live by faith. And they forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asheroth. Now, Baal is going to keep coming up. He's the primary idol in the region, and he's a god of some kind of fertility and life-giving. And the idea here, and this is what Mr. Taylor warned you about, parents, as we kind of get into it a little bit. The idea is that the Baals and the Asheroth come together in like a sexual union. And so the way that they practice idolatry is through sexual immorality. That's part of what the people of Israel are falling into. And they're thinking some other god's going to give them life besides Yahweh. And so, of course, when people turn away from God, the anger of the Lord is kindled. He responds in that anger, and they end up being under the hand of the king of Mesopotamia. And that's when Othniel, when they cry out to the Lord, he raises up his judge, Othniel. And you might remember Othniel from the book of Joshua, his connection with Caleb, how he married Caleb's daughter. Well, here he comes. He's the first judge of Israel. And he delivers the people out of the king of Mesopotamia. The Spirit of the Lord is upon Othniel. And so he's the first judge. The second judge is Ehud. Ehud. And this guy's going to be easy for you to remember because he's a left-handed, dagger-slinging assassin is what this guy is. And now, a lot of people are going to make a point about how Ehud is left-handed. And if you start digging around on the internet about Ehud, you're going to start hearing a sermon where God can even use left-handed people. Let me just tell you right now, everybody, that's fool's gold, okay? We're digging for treasure, but if you try to dig too deep and, this thing about this judge is super symbolic. Look, I know a lot of left-handed people. God bless them. They're some of the godliest, best people I know. Stop discriminating against anybody who's left-handed. That's not the point of this story. It's a detail that's given to us because he pulls a dagger out of his right thigh with his left hand and he puts it into the fat king's stomach and the dagger disappears, much, I'm sure, to the delight of the Israelites who were happy to see the fat king dead. And that's another thing that we were warning you about. parents is we're talking about a fat king, which is a word we encourage kids not to say. But here it is in the Bible. And a belly's so big that the dagger went right in and didn't come back out, right? Not to mention the little restroom joke there about how he died in the restroom and they thought, well, we'll just give him some time, and then he was in there for a long time. You can hear the Israelites giggling, and maybe they're getting laughing so hard and they're snorting like a pig, if you've ever gotten to that stage of laughter. That's what they thought about Ehud. And he rallies the people, and they win a great victory. Now, you're noticing already with the first two judges, it happens quick, the story. And what we're not getting that we got so much with Moses and Joshua is the teaching of the law. These are just short accounts of battle, of a war going on. And especially the third judge, Shamgar. We literally get one verse on this guy. And people speculate all kinds of things based on the one verse. When you only get one verse about a guy, I think you're only supposed to get a little bit about him. I know it's going to be not satisfying. I want to know more of the story of Shamgar, because the piece we get is a great tease. He killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad. Wow, this sounds like a warrior, right? I mean, an ox goad's going to be like a staff, a very long thing, kind of a hook at the end of it. Think of something used to goad oxes. That's where the name comes from. So we're talking about a guy probably swinging a staff around like a super strong ninja, taking 600 Philistines down. Kind of a preview of Samson, who we're going to get to. Maybe you don't get a lot about him, but here's the point. When we go through these judges, okay, and we've seen the first three here, the point isn't the judges. Let's just remember, the point, more than that, is on the sin of the people. And that's where the anger of the Lord comes in so that someone rules over them. Then when they groan and cry out, God raises up a judge. So the real point is on the God who raises up the judges, not the judges, although the stories of Othniel, Ehud, and Shamgar are definitely interesting. Now, we're out here digging for treasure. We're locked out of Joshua Tree National Park, and we're digging into Judges 3, the book of Judges, a place a lot of people think there's not much treasure to be found. But you and I here on Scripture of the Day, we're here to dig. And when you're going to dig, one of the tools that you've really got, one of the shovels to find the gold, is the original languages that the Bible was written in. And the book of Judges is part of the Hebrew Bible. And so if you want to dig, and this is something you can even do, at blueletterbible.org, you can look up a verse and start seeing the original words there in Hebrew, or you can just listen to somebody like a good pastor who will refer to the languages and share with you some of the insights. And so I started studying about God testing us in 1 Peter. And eventually my study of 1 Peter and James led me back to Isaiah, back to Psalms, where it's so clear that it's not just trials are testing us, but God is using the trials to test his people. And I found this word, seraph, this Hebrew word. And it was used like gold being refined in the fire, that kind of testing. But then when I started reading Judges 3, and I saw here again, God is testing his people. The word here was Nasa. And so now I'm intrigued. Now it's getting me going. Okay, we got two different Hebrew words that refer to testing. Do these words mean the same thing? Is there a nuance between them? And so I start looking up how these words are used. What other verses are they in? And lo and behold, I come upon a third word for the idea of testing, bakan. Now I'm on to my third Hebrew word about God testing people, and I'm finding verses about God testing people, testing their heart, testing who they truly are, all over the Hebrew Bible. And then I found the real treasure. And I want to share it with you. And it's in one of the other real tools that we can dig up the treasure with, a cross-reference. And I found it in Psalm 26, verse 2. Psalm 26, 2. I want to invite you to turn there with me. Because after all of this looking into what does it mean to God testing people, this is the mother lode right here. And so we're going to go to our box set, our treasure chest of the Hebrew Bible here, everybody. And we're going to open this up. And we're going to go here. We're going to leave Judges 3 behind. and our 7th book, and we're going to go all the way over to the first book of the writings. Psalms 26, verse 2 is where we want to go. And here in Psalms 26:2, it's exactly who is speaking when you think of the Psalms, David. And if you're looking at it with me in Psalm 26:2, he says all 3 Hebrew words about God testing. And he's getting in all the meaning, all the nuance. He uses all 3. Seraph, Nasa, Bakan. He uses them all right here. Prove me, O Lord, O Yahweh, and try me. Test my heart and my mind. Do you see what's going on? Is God's out here testing people. God, in the book of Judges, he's testing them, and they're failing to obey. They're not passing the test of faith. They're turning to idols. God raises up a judge, saves them, delivers them. They keep doing what is evil in God's sight. It's like God's looking for someone who's going to pass the test of obedience and live by faith. And in Judges, they're failing over and over. And then eventually, we have this man, David, and that's why he's known as a man after God's own heart, because God's heart is to test people and see who will obey. And David's heart is, test me, God. Prove me. Try me. Test who I really am on my inner man, because inside of me, what I want you to see, God, is I obey you. I trust in you. I worship you with all that I am. David goes on to say in the next verse, for your steadfast love is before my eyes, and I walk in your faithfulness. Who you are, God, that's who I want to be. If you're testing me, I'm here. Test me, because I want to obey you. See, one of the things that you need to understand about the book of Judges, as we're going to read through so much sin, so much that is evil in the sight of the Lord, as the people of Israel fail the test of obedience again and again, you can see, if you look back here, that the book of Judges, our 7th book, is setting up here. You can see what's after Judges. It's the book of Samuel. And who is Samuel the prophet going to anoint to be king of God's people, Israel? Who is he going to raise up, God, as a man after his own heart? Well, it's the man who said, test me, try me, prove me. It's that man, David. So that's what the book of Judges is showing us. All these people who failed the test are getting ready for a man that God was going to raise who said, go ahead and test me, God. And so I hope you'll keep reading with us as we're going through the book of Judges and we're digging for treasure here on Scripture of the Day.